I just want to start with a quick show of hands. How many of you in the audience here tonight were cared for as children mainly by women? Surely that's most of us. It's got to be. I was also raised by women. My mother and my godmother. That's me with my godmother in 1988 when I was 2. My mother is Greek American, and she wanted me and my sister to grow up speaking Greek. So just after I was born, she put an ad in the Greek newspaper for a nanny. Several women applied, but my mother knew as soon as she met Maria that she was the right one because she reminded her of her own grandmother. 6 months later, my parents asked Maria to be my godmother. The word for godmother in Greek is nonna, and that's what she's always been to me. By the time she met my mother, Nonna had been in the US for nearly 15 years. She had come over from Greece with her husband and their 2 grown children because her husband, who was a carpenter, had struggled to find work in Greece. At that time, most Greeks had relatives of some sort in the US because of the major migratory flows at the beginning of the century. And so they did as all other Greek immigrants did and went wherever they had relatives. First Alabama, then Georgia, Florida, Chicago, New Jersey, and finally New York, where we lived. Nonna absolutely loved the United States, but her life was also restricted there. She struggled to find work. She had only a primary school education, so she wasn't qualified for most jobs. She spoke some English, but not enough to work in English-speaking workplaces. Then, of course, there was the issue of her being an immigrant. Then, as now, employers didn't especially like hiring immigrants. She wanted to work, to have a life outside of the home, but there was very little opportunity for her to do so. And without money of her own, her husband had virtually total control over her life. So, like many other enterprising Greek immigrants, my grandparents included, she started thinking about starting a business. She was an accomplished cook and baker, and she wanted to open a bakery. That was also the business that Greeks went into. I mean, at that point, at least 3/4 of the diners in New York City were owned by Greeks. So here was a perfect opportunity for her. She knew people who could help her set up. She'd be selling mainly to other Greeks, so language wouldn't be an issue. There was a ready market for her products, and she'd get a chance to really be part of American society. There was only one problem. Her husband wouldn't hear of it. He didn't think women should go into business. He thought that was for men only. He told her she'd make a laughingstock of him, and that under no circumstances was she allowed to open a bakery. So she answered that ad in the Greek newspaper instead and became my nanny. Fast forward to 2012. I've just finished a master's in gender and development at the LSE and have decided that I don't want to do anything that qualifies me to do. So I start volunteering in kitchens around London, in community cafes and in the kitchens of migrant and refugee drop-in centers. And there I meet many, many women, immigrant and refugee women, who remind me of my godmother, women who can't find work and who gravitate toward volunteering in kitchens to make use of their skills, to meet new people, to practice their English, to gain some work experience, and above all, to give back to their adopted communities. Because even when women have little themselves, even when they are struggling in a new place, still, they find a way to give to others. This is something that all of us sitting here, raised by women, know. We know it personally as a part of our own life stories. Most of us owe the fact that we are now competent human beings with successful careers and rich emotional lives to the women who raised us. And more specifically, we owe it to the vast, uncounted, unrecognized, unrewarded work that went into raising us. This work is what we gender experts call reproductive labor, to distinguish it from the productive labor that happens in the world outside of the home and is compensated financially. But reproductive labor also says something about its fundamental, essential value to society, because it is this labor, uncounted in the economy, unpaid, that allows society to reproduce itself. We would not be sitting here were it not for this labor. Our careers, our relationships, our lives, none of this would be possible were it not for the reproductive labor performed by women. We, all of us, are living proof of the unquantifiable value of this work to human society. We are its products. We, all of us, owe our mothers big time. And yet, while we know this in our hearts, we don't really assign value to this work in the wider world. It isn't compensated, and when it is, as with babysitters and care workers, for example, it's insecure and underpaid. Care work is undervalued at a societal level, which is evident in our approach to family leave and flexible working for mothers. Of course, now that I'm in Luxembourg, I have to soften my case here a bit because, you guys have it a lot better than the UK and the US. But still, the fact remains, it isn't easy for women to balance having a career and having kids. And if we really valued the contribution that women make to society, if we acknowledged that none of us would be here in this room without it, then it would be easy. I've been working on these issues for almost 10 years now, but it never ceases to amaze me that women, in this day and age, in 2016, are still penalized for being mothers. Motherhood is still considered an obstacle and a liability. Employers continue to avoid hiring women of childbearing age because there's the danger that they will have a child. But in my experience, what most handicaps mothers is the simple fact that the number one deterrent to employers hiring new people is a lack of a recent employment history. Now, imagine you've taken a year out of your career to have a baby. If you have the good fortune to be well off, to be advanced in your career, to have a salaried job with good benefits, to be white, you'll probably find your job waiting for you when you come back, or at least your prospects of getting a new job are pretty good. But if you're not, if you're poor and have only ever had entry-level jobs or insecure wage work, you're screwed. And if on top of that you are an immigrant, and perhaps you don't speak the language of your adopted country fluently, perhaps you are a person of color, perhaps you have qualifications that aren't recognized by the professional bodies in your new country, and the cost of retraining is astronomical, and perhaps, well, actually almost certainly, you lack professional networks and people to vouch for you, well, good luck. There are no jobs for you. This is what I found when I started volunteering in kitchens in London back in 2012. I found that an underclass of citizens was being produced. It's hard for male migrants and refugees to get jobs, but it's harder still for migrant women, and much, much harder for migrant mothers. Most of the women I met had been unemployed for years. Some of them had even stopped registering as unemployed because they'd given up hope of ever finding a job. Most of them survived on government handouts and were shunted by employment agencies from volunteering opportunity to volunteering opportunity, none of which would ever lead to a job. But what made me angriest about all of this was that it made absolutely no sense. The UK economy was in the gutter. These women had skills, highly marketable culinary skills that could be leveraged into new business opportunities, to create jobs for people who would then pay taxes, whose businesses would grow and create more jobs for more people who would also pay taxes, all while creating massive savings for the government, who would no longer have to pay out unemployment and low-income benefits. But instead, here they were, volunteering, giving back to their communities even as they struggled to survive. And so, all of a sudden, in 2012, I find myself, a newly minted gender studies graduate, going into business, of all things. I call myself an accidental social entrepreneur because I did not have my sights set on social enterprise until the moment I stumbled into it. Truth be told, I knew very little about social enterprise and not a thing about business. I saw a problem, and I had a solution. The means of that solution just happened to be social enterprise. The problem, as I've suggested, is that there were no opportunities for migrant and refugee women to apply the valuable skills they already possessed. My solution was to open a restaurant where those skills could be immediately leveraged into paid employment and also provide employment support to move women into other secure and sustainable jobs in the food industry and business support to help them realize their dreams of starting their own food businesses. I decided to call this restaurant Mazimas, which means with us in Greek, in honor of my godmother. Mazimas is a very simple solution, but it has lots of positive and multiplying effects. My favorite thing about it, because this, as you can probably tell, is my crusade in life, is that it literally assigns a financial value to the care work that women do and pays them for it. Mazimas takes reproductive labor and moves it into the productive realm, where it can have commercial value. If you come to the restaurant, you will pay £4 for Roberta's Brazilian cheese bread, a recipe and a skill that she learned at home from her mother. This is good because it means that women are paid for the skills they have developed raising us, but also because it starts an important conversation about the value that we place on the work being done in the home by women and men, the work that has made all of us competent human beings. The way Mazimas works is quite simple. We hire migrant and refugee women as chefs. We sell their food to the public. We pay them London living wage, which is ostensibly enough to live on, although in London, all bets are off. We provide training to formalize and develop their skills so that they are transferable to other professional kitchens, and are now developing a long-term business incubator program that will shepherd their business ideas from concept to reality. We also have a catering and events business, which is the more commercial arm of Mazimas, and yields profits that we plow back into the business to fund central costs and training. Of course, we didn't start like this. As I said, I knew nothing about business back in 2012. I knew from the get-go that I wanted to open a restaurant, but obviously had no idea how to do that. So I started with what I knew I could do. I knew I could get 30 friends in a room and get them each to part with £25 for a beautiful 3-course meal cooked by an immigrant woman. And that is the poster for that first event, and that is a photo of the first event. Mazimas started there, and since then we've grown organically, operating as an itinerant pop-up for the first year, moving around London doing one-off events, and then transitioning in the past 2 years into running temporary restaurants. Initially, these were open for only a month or two at a time, serving the public 5 nights a week, but more recently we've been occupying spaces for longer periods of time. Last year we were based at a theatre in South London for 9 months, and now our home is a restaurant in East London where we run an evening service 5 nights a week. This will probably become the first permanent base for Mazimas in London, the first of many, we hope. At the moment, we work with 7 chefs in the restaurant. They represent 7 countries and 4 continents. Our menu is developed collaboratively and features dishes from a few of the chefs at a time. The menu changes seasonally, and with it, the chefs and countries represented. We cook the kind of food we like to eat: simple, full of flavor, and rooted in rich cultural traditions. At the end of the day, Mazimas lives or dies, as all social enterprises do, on the strength of its business proposition, not on the strength of its social mission. So far, luckily, it's proven to be a solid one. So what are the outcomes of our work? The most obvious, and in many ways the most important, is financial independence for women. Financial independence is the first, most basic condition of gender equality. This has a very tangible effect on women's lives. With an independent income, they can make their own choices about their lives and the lives of their children. And crucially, they can leave abusive partners, which is very, very difficult to do when women are financially dependent on their partners. Mazimas also cultivates confidence, which to me is the most important aspect of our work, although it's also the least quantifiable. Without confidence, without self-belief, without everything that comes from taking pride in one's work and earning respect and affirmation from the people around you, without that, nothing else can take root. A key long-term aim is the diversification of the restaurant industry, which in the US and in the UK is very male and very white, and ensuring that women get a larger piece of the culinary pie. Most of the world's cooking is done by women, and yet they are hugely represented in the culinary world, and immigrant women and women of color even more so. Mazimas is also about visibility for the women we work with. Sounds simple, but there is nothing more fundamental to social equality than being visible and having a voice. Most immigrant and refugee women do not. Mazimas has changed that for the women we work with, but also, I believe, for other women too, by shining a light on the difficulties they face as immigrants and as women. Our Peruvian chef Marlit once said that to her, the most important thing about Mazimas was that it gave her a place in the world. And I can think of nothing more valuable than that. There's so much more I could say, but I'd like to end with a few reflections on social enterprise based on my experiences. At the end of the day, social enterprise is problem solving. This is why I think it holds tremendous promise, both for the future of society, but also for the future of business. From where I stand, the charity model can offer us very little in the way of problem solving, because it casts people as objects of charity instead of people who lack opportunities. What happens with this kind of discourse is that global systems of injustice and oppression that are denying people opportunities are ignored and thereby normalized. At Mazimas, we are changing the conversation to say, no, these women have tremendous skills. It is patriarchal systems that limit their opportunities to apply their skills. Charity implies a tacit acceptance of these systems. It means that instead of fighting to create opportunities for women, we will simply accept that there are none and offer them charitable, financial, and social support to survive instead. Far from driving social change, this totally fails to challenge the status quo. And it means that immigrant women are locked into a cycle of dependence that has continuing and worsening effects for their children and their children's children. We can also create opportunities by supporting each other, by joining together to create a strong ecosystem of business done differently. Competition should not be at the forefront of our minds. What I mean by this, very practically, is not just networking and sharing contacts, but proactively buying products and services from each other. We are, after all, businesses. We should all be using social enterprises as our preferred suppliers, even if it means paying a bit more. Go with the supplier that sees the world the way you see it, and someone else will do the same for you. We are all values-led businesses. We want to see more values-led businesses, so we need to stop supporting profit-led businesses. At Mazimas, we make a point of doing this and have long-standing partnerships with many other social enterprises, including a farm that supplies our vegetables. If you give another social enterprise a contract, you are indirectly creating opportunities. You are helping to build an ecosystem, and you are strengthening the sector as a whole. I want to end with another practical point in an area where I think the social enterprise sector has a lot of room to improve. How can we ensure that social enterprise is a diverse field and does not look like the profit-driven business world? Overwhelmingly male, overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly wealthy. My answer is early-stage funding. It is absolutely critical. I am an example of what most social enterprise looks like. White, upper middle class. It's important that we are very honest about this. Mazimas got off the ground because my family were in a position to loan me money so that I could work on building it. That is an extremely fortunate, extremely privileged, and extremely rare position to be in. This is really important because in social enterprise, the grassroots, bottom-up solutions are the most effective. We need to be acting from what we know best, from our experiences, and upper middle class people do not know about poverty. We've been there, it's called colonialism, and it didn't turn out so well. The solutions for poverty need to be coming from people who have experienced poverty, and those people are generally not in a position to spend 6 months or a year working unpaid. We need early-stage funding for social entrepreneurs right from the idea phase, not once there is proof of concept. If you wait that long to fund people, you've lost the battle, because you will only have projects led by people who come from privileged backgrounds. And when that happens, and continues to happen, social enterprise starts to look exactly like mainstream enterprise. It starts to preserve the status quo, which is, I think, exactly the opposite of where we want to be going. Thank you.